Well, good morning, YouTube. This is Chuck, and it's Saturday, September 28th, 2024, a little bit before noon. And as you can see, I'm back out here in the van. And I got something real interesting for you today. But before I start, this is my 500th video. Can you believe it? I've done 500 of these things, and now some of them have been shorts, but they all count. And I've done a little bit over 100 of the Bigfoot Stuff videos, and that's what this one's going to be. But my channel's been up, I started on October 15th of 2022. So in a couple weeks, I'll be celebrating 2 years of running this YouTube channel. And I've got 500 videos up and 4,400 and some subscribers, and I appreciate each and every one of you. And as you know, my channel's about a lot of different things, and so it's not all about the same thing. So some of you are interested in the Bigfoot stuff, and some of you are interested in the van and travel stuff, and some of you are interested in just about anything I do. And I appreciate I appreciate all you guys, and especially those dedicated ones that comment a lot. But I wanted to bring you something a little bit different for my 500th video, but boy, I tell you, the last couple of days have been pretty spectacular on Bigfoot stuff, and so I've got 4 stories that I want to bring to you, and everything happened within the last 48 hours, and that's what makes it interesting. At least I heard about it in the last 48 hours. Some of the stuff I'm not sure exactly when it did happen, but it's all pretty recent. So number one started out yesterday at 3 o'clock in the morning, and that's my story, what happened to me. And I'm going to actually bump that one and do that one last. So I made myself some notes so I don't get confused on some stuff. So we're going to start with number 2. And number 2, yesterday morning when I came downstairs, I got a text message from a lady up in Montana. And I've had contact with her before, and she had something happen that they live in town, but they have a cabin that's in a real remote part of the state up there, and they had something really odd happen at their cabin, and so she wanted to tell me about it and get my opinion on it, and she wanted to know whether I'd experienced that before or know anybody who had. And what it was she and her husband were out, and they have one of those modern, real high-powered flashlights, and they were out after dark and not too far from the cabin, and up on the hill above them they heard a noise, and so they shined a light up there, and what they got a huge, big, round reflection. Now, you all know about the reflectors, the red ones and the white ones that people put along their driveways and such. Well, this was like a big white reflector, but it was huge. Several feet across, to say the least, and round, and it was up on the hillside. And so they saw it, and initially they thought it was glowing, and they turned the light off, and they couldn't see it anymore. And they turned the light back on, it was there again. And so it was up there for a while, and every time they'd shine the light toward it, there'd be this big reflection up there. And then all of a sudden they shined the light up there, and it was gone. And the next night they went out there and shined the light up there, and nothing there. So there was absolutely nothing up there to make that reflection, to reflect that light. It was not glowing, it was reflecting. So she had no idea what it was, and she asked me, and I hadn't heard of that sort of thing myself either. So I don't know what it was either. But they've had a bunch of other stuff happen as well, and if you add it all up, it kind of tells me that they're not at that cabin all the time, and it kind of tells me that there's Sasquatch people there, and what they're doing is trying to get their attention, and they've got some of the little young ones that are probably pranking on them a little bit. But for the most part, they're not doing anything scary. Now, they have a 3-year-old grandson, and the 3-year-old grandson got scared of something. But by and large, they're not acting like they're trying to scare them. But I spoke to her on the phone for, a little over 20 minutes yesterday morning. Well, and of course, if you watched my last video, I spent most of yesterday trying to figure out the silly dishwasher and get it working again. So fast forward until yesterday afternoon, and I get a text from my friend Tony in North Carolina. And I saw the text come in. I didn't even get a chance to read it, and he called me. And I spoke with him on the phone for, once again, a little over 20 minutes. And he's had ongoing activity down at his place, but they'd kind of backed off a little bit. And he'd been leaving food out for him pretty regular, but then he went out there one day and found that the raccoons had been getting into it. And so he told his forest friends out there, he says, I leave stuff out for you, but I'm not leaving stuff for the raccoons. And so he hasn't been leaving stuff out near as much. And they haven't been around near as much either. They were around quite a bit at the beginning, but they've kind of been living their own life and kind of letting him live his own life. But one of the things they have been doing, interestingly enough, is they've been leaving him gifts. And the gifts they've been leaving him are pretty leaves. Now, that's not that unusual if they leave leaves and feathers and stones and stuff like this. But what is unusual is where they've been leaving them. He'll get up in the morning and he'll walk into his bathroom in his house, and on the counter in the bathroom next to the sink, here's a leaf. Now, the house is all closed up, locked up at night. How did that leaf get there? Well, over the period of time now, he's got quite a leaf collection, and they left one on the kitchen counter, but all the rest of them they've been leaving on the bathroom counter. And so that's basically them telling him that they're there. Well, yesterday, he went walked down in the woods where they live at, and he's had several sightings of a large male. And he said the rust-colored one is what he's calling him, because he said his hair is the same color as rusty metal. And so, but he's seen him several times. Well, he was down there, and all of a sudden, here, this broad daylight, here's this rusty one with the rusty-colored hair standing about 40 feet away from him. Well, he's seen him before, and he's tried to make mind-speak contact with him, and the rusty-colored one's never responded. Well, this time, he said, "Oh, I see you there. Hello. Can you tell me your name?" And this time, the big male responded, and he said that his name is Yoleho. Now, Tony didn't ask him how old he was or anything, but he's obviously big and he's obviously an adult. But they got a name out of him. And it kind of shocked Tony, because he'd asked him several times and he never responded before. And so Tony was trying to think of what to ask him. So he said, do your people have a name for me? Yes. Well, what is the name they call me? Tony. Well, that struck him as being kind of funny, because they were just calling him by his name. And so he asked him, he says, is Tony a name that your people use? Yes. So what that means is someplace, somewhere, there's a Sasquatch that is named Tony. And so anyway, they're calling my friend Tony from North Carolina by his regular name, and he got the name Yoleho for this big male. And that's been interesting, because he's been having experiences now for quite a few months now. But I hadn't heard from him in about a month. But he wanted to talk to me and tell me that, and I thought that was pretty cool. Well, I went on the rest of the day and got caught up with some stuff, and I put together that video about working on the dishwasher. And while I was uploading that, I got a text message from my friend from Utah, and he had something he wanted to tell me as well. So after I got the video uploaded and after I had dinner, I called him, and he had kind of something interesting to tell me about as well. And his thing started a couple of days ago, and when he goes up to the place that he's been going, and one of the things he does is he takes a handful of peanuts in the shell, and he's been leaving them on a rock up there. And he said he doesn't care whether the birds or the squirrels or whoever it is gets them. He just, that's his thing, and he does that. Well, he had a little bit of activity, but not a whole lot. And it was right at dark, and he was walking back to his car. And he hears a little noise. He looks off to the side, and here's a squirrel. And the squirrel is holding an unshelled, or a shelled peanut still in the shell, holding it in his mouth, and he kind of raises his head up like he's showing him that he's got it. And right near that squirrel, not too far away, was a chipmunk. Well, squirrels and chipmunks don't normally hang out together. And so he thought that was pretty unusual. And one of the things he started noticing is all the little things that happen. And now he'd left those peanuts on a rock quite some distance away from where that squirrel had that peanut. So did that squirrel, with showing him that peanut, was that a coincidence? No, it wasn't a coincidence. That squirrel was deliberately there to show him that he had that peanut. Well, fast forward to yesterday afternoon. Yesterday afternoon, my friend from Utah was at his house, and all of a sudden he gets the little tingle. Well, every one of their little tingles is just a little bit different, and if you got the same one, you're meeting with the same one all the time, after a while you get to the point where you can recognize that tingle. And so he thought, hey, this is Lewis. Well, Lewis is a 9-year-old. And Lewis wants to be my friend's buddy, and he's around quite a bit. And my friend actually saw him here a few days ago, just real briefly, full solid, his first full solid sighting. He was pretty excited about that, and he told me about that as well. But he said Lewis is a little shorter than he is, which is pretty big for a 9-year-old. But anyway, it was Lewis, and Lewis wanted to know if he was going to come up to the spot tonight, which would have been Thursday night, I guess. Yeah, because it was Friday when he was telling me about that. Because now today is Saturday. I get my days mixed up sometimes. Excuse me for that. So anyway, so he told him no. He says he wasn't planning on going up there tonight, but he'd be up there the next night. And and Lewis, he said he could tell that Lewis almost disappointed over that. And so he said, Lewis, can I ask you a question? Yes. That squirrel that had the peanut the other night up there, was that you? Yes. Holy cow. Well, was the chipmunk, was that one of you as well? My brother. Oh, how old is your brother? 3. What's your brother's name? Jonathan. But he said he cut the name Jonathan real short, and all of a sudden he felt a sense of alarm, and he realized that Lewis probably wasn't supposed to tell him that. So he told Lewis, he said, hey, I don't want to get you in trouble. I know you're not supposed to share some stuff with us, and I don't want you to get in trouble. But, so, don't tell me anything that you're not supposed to tell me. And so they kind of let it go at that. But can you imagine if a 3-year-old has the ability to shapeshift into a chipmunk? Can you imagine what the capabilities of an adult, or especially an elder, what they can do? That's got to be truly amazing. But anyway, that was his story, and I talked to him I was on the phone. I told him about my next story, which would be story number 1, actually. This one is number 4. And so I'm going to go back to story number 1, which is what happened to me. And what happened to me is extremely remarkable. But anyway, I got up at a little bit before 3. My bladder got me up, and so I had to go do my business. And I went back, I laid down in bed, and it was right about 3 o'clock. And now I'm a side sleeper, and so I was laying on my left side, and I hadn't gone back to sleep. I just barely got laid back down, and all of a sudden I got nailed with not a tingle, but a zap. And it's what we call a full half-body zap. And a full half-body zap basically means that if you draw a line right down the middle of your body, it's one whole half of your body, either the left side or the right side, the whole thing gets zapped at the same time. But the other side doesn't. And when you're laying down, it's usually the upper side. So I was laying on my left side, which means my whole right side got zapped. From my head, my arm, down to my leg, my toes. And it was a pretty solid zap. And that told me that definitely there was somebody there. Now, the zap acted to me like it wasn't real controlled. And my first thought was, I wonder if this is a juvenile. So I responded back like I always do. I said, hey, thank you for that. I realize you're here. And, are you somebody I know? And I didn't get a response. And so I said, well, what's your name? Eddie. Sounded like a juvenile. Name was Eddie. But I could sense that he wasn't the only one there. So I says, is there somebody else here too? My brother. Oh, what's your brother's name? Lionel. You guys aren't by yourself. Is somebody else there? And there was an adult. And the adult's name was Trevordor. And that was their dad. And so, here I had a dad that brought his 2 young sons. And I think that Eddie was probably around 10 or so. And maybe Lionel might be a couple years younger, but Lionel didn't really say much. And Eddie was the one that did all the talking, and Eddie was pretty excited. Well, and I'm laying on my left side, and I've told you before about the way my bedroom is arranged, but basically my bedroom is the second floor above a 2-car garage. And so it's a pretty large room. And it's about 13 wide and 26 long, and 11 foot tall in the tallest part. My bed's down on one end and the stairway's at the other, so there's a pretty large area right in there. And I'm laying facing the center of the bed, so I'm facing away from that big open area. And I was getting pretty solidly zapped and tingled, and I knew they were there. And so Eddie's asking me some questions. And one of the questions he asked me, he said, "Did you run a bulldozer?" And, well, back when I was younger, yeah, I worked construction for a while, and I can and have run bulldozers. And I didn't quite understand what was going on there. Well, then, all of a sudden, I got kind of this, almost like a knowledge drop. And basically what I came to be is that Eddie, like a lot of young human kids, he was just fascinated with construction equipment, especially bulldozers. And apparently, somewhere along the line, his dad must have known that. And so he brought Eddie and Lionel, and they wanted to talk to me about bulldozers of all things. And so I'm laying there, and I'm trying to think of how to respond to this. And so I thought about it as something I did on a job, good grief, 50 years ago, back when I was still working construction. And in order to tell you exactly about it, I got to tell you a little background. I worked for a small construction company, and we had a bunch of equipment, and everything was old and falling apart. And there was only 2 of us that weren't members of the family that worked there, myself and an older guy named Howard. And so one of the advantages of working a little spot like that is you get to learn how to run equipment. I learned how to run a bulldozer. I learned how to run a backhoe and a front-end loader and a grader. And we had a total of 4 bulldozers, and 3 of them were made by International Harvester, and 2 of them were military surplus TD-18 Internationals, and that's about the same size as a D6 Caterpillar. The other one, and the one I liked the best, was a TD-24 International, and that's about the same size as a D8 Caterpillar, which is a pretty good sized machine for the day. Now, there's much bigger ones now, but at that time, the D8 was a pretty big machine. And the other one we had actually was a D8 Caterpillar, and it was hooked into a towed Laterno scraper. And that's a whole other story. I may tell you about that in another one. But anyway, this TD-24 International, we had it sitting at a gravel pit. And we used it to push gravel up into a pile so we could scoop it up and put it in a dump truck and haul it places. And we had 3 dump trucks, 2 6-yard single-axle dump trucks and an 8-yard tandem-axle dump truck. And we just left that TD-24 sit at the pit all the time. And every once in a while, when the pile had run low, the boss would send one of us down there to push up the pile, to rip it up. And it's all decomposed granite. And of course, he used a lot of decomposed granite and landscaping and stuff. And here it's a dominant soil type here, so we use it for all kinds of things. And if you ever work dirt construction, and some of you might get a laugh out of this, and there's a simple statement, and that is that dirt's never in the right place. There's either not enough of it or too much, and that's why there's so many dump trucks in the world to haul it back and forth. And so we hauled a lot of dirt. We moved a lot of dirt. We were either filling in holes or ripping down hillsides. And in this particular case, our little gravel pit, we were ripping down a hillside. And so anyway, it wasn't unusual for my boss to just send me over there and tell me to push up a pile. And so thinking back on doing that, I started kind of playing a memory movie back over in my head. And Eddie, he was right there, and I don't know how they do it, but I was sharing that with him, and he was watching that. And so in my memory movie, I got in my old truck that I was driving at the time, and I drove over to that gravel pit, and I was going to push some gravel with that TD24. And the old TD24 Internationals, the way you started them is they had a dual fuel system, and they actually had a carburetor, an ignition system, spark plugs, distributor, the whole thing to run on gasoline. And then you threw a big lever and it would convert them over to diesel, run on diesel. So what you do when they're cold is you start them on gasoline and you let them run for a little bit to warm up a little bit. And then you switched them over to run on diesel. And once they started running on diesel, that's where all the power was. Well, good golly, so I basically, in this little dream movie, I was playing for myself and playing for Eddie. I went over and I started up that TD24 and run it on gasoline for a little bit. Then I run it over to diesel. And then I started pushing up that gravel. And it was just for all the world like he was sitting on the seat with me and I was showing him how to do that. And he was just loving every minute of it. Now, like everything I say, you can take any of this, take it or leave it as you will. But that was pretty amazing. And that whole sequence lasted for probably 30 minutes. And it was just absolutely amazing because I could sense Eddie's excitement and about doing all that. And I could sense that his dad was kind of excited that he was able to do that. And I didn't get much from Lionel. But Eddie was it was like Eddie was having the time of his life. And I can just imagine at somewhere in time, somewhere where they live. I don't know where that family group lives, but I can just imagine that somewhere there's a construction project. And I just imagine in the middle of the night that Eddie goes down there and he sits on the seat in a bulldozer somewhere and probably makes vroom, vroom motor sounds and pretends like he's running that dozer. And I was able to actually kind of take him along on a sequence, a memory sequence, and give him a ride and show him how they actually work. And that was just amazing. I've never done anything like that before, and I was wide awake during this whole thing. I know what was going on. So as I always tell you, take it for what you will, but that was just an absolutely incredible experience. And that happened to me literally yesterday morning. So I thought about that all day in between working on the dishwasher, and I wasn't going to make this video. I wasn't going to really tell you about it. And I was going to try to make my 500th video about something else. But when I was talking to my friend in Utah last evening, and I told him about this happening, and he told me, Chuck, you've got to tell that story. That story is just too cool not to tell. And I got to thinking about it after I talked to him, and I decided, yeah, I think he's right. I think that story did need to be shared, and it's unusual enough and it's just wild and beyond weird enough that, like I tell you with all of them, take it for what you will. If you want to believe it, fine. If you don't want to believe it, fine. But it happened. It happened just the way I related it. And so that's 4 interesting stories that all happened. At least I got the information all within the last, let's say 36 hours. And so that's what I was going to tell you today, but let me add one more little thing. And this morning, just a little bit ago, I got a text from Alabama Al, and I hadn't heard anything from Al for quite a time either. And so he and I talked on the phone once again for about 20 minutes, and he kind of brought me up to date on the things that are happening at his place. And so I guess you can call that story number 5. And nothing specific that I want to share with you, but he's still got the same kind of activity going on. And he still doesn't know what to make of it. And he's still seeing him at the same spot. And so anyway, I guess that's enough. I don't know how long this thing has gone, but that's my stories. 4.5 stories, call it. My 500th video. Can't imagine it's been that many. I'm still working on some other stuff, and I'll bring you some else other. But as I always tell you, take care of each other, love each other, and take care of yourself. And tell your friends about the channel. It's been an amazing ride, and it's just a long ways from being over. And so I guess there's nothing more to tell you at this point than to wrap this one up. And until I talk to you again, just tell you, peace out.